we are gathered here today to have one hell of a conversation about the Evil Dead franchise, because I'm going to give you my ranking of least to most beloved Evil Dead film, because we are one day away from Evil Dead Burn. And like you, my excitement is peaked. I'm ready to go. My body and soul is ready for the utter damnation that is going to be portrayed on the silver screen. But first, in order to fill the gap between now and then, I'm going to talk to you about my ranking. And I hope that you guys leave your ranking down below in the comment section just to see how close we are to each other's placement on the list. The Evil Dead conversation is awesome simply because there's so many different takes. Some people love the OGs but don't like where the new ones are headed in terms of tone. Some people love the new ones but don't necessarily fuck with the OGs. And then there are people like me who genuinely think there's not a single bad film in the franchise. And there is certainly not a bad show in the franchise. Which, by the way, I will never forgive those who let it fail. We had 3 incredible seasons and an amazing cliffhanger, and we'll not see that 4th season because people didn't show up. Now, granted, this could be because of Starz. No one knew what Starz was. No one wanted a subscription to Starz. So I also think that's mostly a platform problem. But people pirated the shit out of that show, according to Bruce Campbell, and that really sucks. Because I would have loved to have seen where that cliffhanger would have taken us, which originally was a deleted ending to Army of Darkness. They just tried to do it again, and we're never going to get that. It's kind of sad, but nonetheless, we'll touch into all the little nuances and intricacies of this narrative as we move forward. But I am going to, one, let you know, I don't think there is a single bad movie in this franchise. So even though my least favorite is my least favorite, it does not mean I think it's a bad movie at all. It just means that there is one just ahead of it that's a little better. All right, with that being said, let's start from the top, okay? Number 6, my least favorite Evil Dead film, but still a good one. And some of you are going to bite my head off for this because I know how much love there is for this film in particular, and I really enjoyed it. But upon this current watch, it didn't hold up as well because of character. And that movie is Evil Dead Rise. Evil Dead, while being about all the pure evil deadness, it's also about Ash Williams. You have a character as memorable as Ash Williams. Ash Williams is a name that stood the test of time. In terms of final girls, we have our Scream Queens, right? We know them well. I don't need to utter them here because you're already thinking of one. But when it comes to a specific male hero in a horror film, you really got to squint hard to go like, and I mean hard. And obviously there are names, but none of them go toe-to-toe with Ash Williams. Ash's character, his humor, his comedic timing, his brawniness, his occasional stupidity, his evolution from Shy Guy in Evil Dead 1 to this cocky to a fault, jockish, ready to go to war, badass, is such a crazy turn. And it's one that you can feel. And it just gets bigger, and his ego gets bigger. He becomes the brand. He is the brand. Just look at his ultimate peak transformation in Ash vs. Evil Dead. He is at his Super Saiyan 4 by that point. Like, he is absolutely full Ash. And I just think that when you move forward with any film in the Evil Dead franchise, you're always going to have to deal with his shadow. The biggest issue with Evil Dead Rise, to me, are the characters. I don't find the characters in any way, shape, or form interesting to follow. I think that you had the grungy, groupie chick who really didn't go anywhere beyond, oh, I'm so much of a groupie that I actually am pregnant now because I made bad decisions. That kind of doesn't really go nowhere. And then, of course, kids. Like, kids are a cheat. You put kids in a movie, you're gonna kind of pull at people's heartstrings most of the time. The best character in the film is the mother. Her performance as the Deadite is absolutely resoundingly terrifying, with such bangers as "Mommy's with the maggots now." Like, that line delivery is kind of fucking sick, and somehow managed to be an iconic line in Evil Dead lore. Because I don't think anybody can hear that line and go, Where the fuck's that from? Like, it just hit that hard. The way that she delivered it, the tranquil nature of how it was delivered, superimposed over this demonic shrill, like, that is just fucking haunting. Mommy is with the maggots now. Great line delivery. Her entire performance in the movie is what truly carried the film. Where in other films we focus on more than one Deadite, here she carries 80% of the movie before we do get a multitude of Deadites that really don't do much except yell, "We're gonna eat your soul," over and over again, or "Dead by Dawn" the entire time. But she carries that movie, and it's just terrifying, the concept of your mother being controlled by something else. The emotional arc of that alone already had me reeling at the idea of where this could have led and where it could have ended. I think the practical effects in that movie are fantastic. And while it's not as gory as people lead on, because it's really not that gory in any way, shape, or form, I would argue it's probably the least gory out of all the films. I think it is disturbing in nature. The scene where one of the kids eats glass and you see the glass poking through the throat. Or obviously the cheese grater scene, which is kind of become iconic. And let's not forget the badass set piece that happened when we were looking through the peephole and we saw her just demolish her neighbors walking back and forth. That entire scene through a peephole was so genius, and I give Lee Cronin so much props for composing that scene the way he did through a peephole. It was just so awesome. And then anything involving the mom on the other side of the door, when she starts singing, the way that she changes her voice to convince one of her kids to let her in, to the absolute massacre that she committed upon her neighbors while being outside. And that entire sequence was awesome. Where I was kind of let down then was the very end. I think the concept of them sticking together was cool in concept. I think in execution, it didn't work for me. It didn't feel scary. I think the whole time being carried through this movie, just solely her being this demonic thing that is psychologically torturing her children, to then just kind of turning into the creature feature when the standard was kind of set up here. I think once we went creature feature fully and she just became this weird mangled mess that just screams, I was like, she's not scary anymore. And I knew at that point we were gonna get some iteration of, a chainsaw kill, which you gotta have. I definitely don't have any issues with that, but I do think this movie is brilliant in its practical effects, brilliant in its makeup, and its tone and its setting. Using the apartment was great. I just think the characters in that final act, for me, really let it down. And it's considering we spend the entire time with these characters and they have fucking zero to no charm whatsoever in a movie franchise that was led by one of the most charming characters in cinema. It just kind of like, I was just like, Nonetheless, I've watched it 3 times, and it is the one that I've seen the least, but I do enjoy it for its atmosphere. I think its atmosphere is brooding as fuck and depressing as hell, and that's what I want. Let's jump to my number 5. Now, this one is going to be controversial, but hear me out, okay? Because I always have a reason. I'm a man of reason. My number 5 is The Evil Dead. All right, the very first one. There is such a charm to seeing what he did in a cabin with his friends and that small amount of money, and still created something that was kinetic, high energy, and in terms of cinematography, still kind of leads the charge. I mean, some of the shots in the film, the way that he treats the camera, the way that he frames everything, the way that everything feels kinetic in nature, you could see what held him back wasn't his skill. It was the budget. It was how far he wanted to take it but couldn't. And the way that he used his entire space to really push the horror beyond what I think anyone else could have with that small of a budget and that small of a space. What he did, what Sam Raimi did, absolutely solidified him as a voice in horror in that time, and made him the great director that he is now, obviously. I do think that it's very obvious that when you watch Evil Dead 2, That was his original vision. Hence why it's edited the way it is, why we have the recap, why it almost feels like he doesn't want you to watch part 1 and just wants you to sit in on part 2, get your recap, and keep moving. That felt like his original intention. That felt like his original idea. So when it comes to The Evil Dead, I can acknowledge that that movie, even now, still holds up. But there are some things that don't. And for me, it's the horror itself. The horror isn't creepy, but the fascination behind that movie for me just comes from watching him work. Everybody is at the top of their game. Every actor, every shot, every bit of sound is absolutely catered to be the best version it can under the circumstances. But you can see where Sam is like, give me more. I want more. I wish I could, but I can't. And it's incredible to see what he did. But you can also tell that he had to hold back a bit. And I think that alone puts it at number 5 for me, because it feels like a proof of concept. It almost feels like, hell yeah, this works as an indie film. This works. Like, any of us would be lucky to have an indie film like that, a first debut film like that. And it does hold up in many aspects, but the horror does not. And I also think that in that film, Bruce Campbell's Ash Williams isn't the Ash Williams that we know and love. Ash Williams really goes through that full sort of character development in the sequel. Like, he becomes the Ash Williams in part 2. And I think in part 1, we get him there and then the movie ends. And I think that because it's not his full vision realized, that's why it has the 5th place for me, but it's in no way, shape, or form a bad movie. You imagine me telling Sam Raimi he made a bad movie? Like, come on. Now it's time for my number 4. And this might also be a controversial take, and that is okay. At me, motherfuckers. It's Army of Darkness. Army of Darkness was my first exposure to the Evil Dead franchise. And it is unironically my most watched of the Evil Dead franchise. It is just so utterly rewatchable. Like, not just as an Evil Dead film, but it's just rewatchable. There is so much unhinged shit that I am willing to believe that Sam Raimi was bumping some cocaine from Stephen King while making that film. Because there is absolutely no way that you weren't on some kind of substance making Army of Darkness. Army of Darkness is like, I feel like the black sheep of the family. A lot of people hated it. I actually went out of my way to read some of the reviews that came out in, I believe it came out in 92. So I went out of my way on Rotten Tomatoes to read some of the reviews, and the sentiment was not great. It was not good. And there are 3 cuts of this movie. There's the theatrical cut, the director's cut, and the television cut. And all of these cuts vary in tone and in quality, and they also vary in scenes by about 7 to 10 minutes, which is a good amount of scenes when you think about it as a whole. Each minute is a page on a script. That's a lot of story being cut. And I've seen them all. And obviously the director's cut to me is like the best. The theatrical cut is quite a mess when you think about everything that was taken out, and you think of the reasons. When you realize that the studio was like, it needs a happier ending, and that's why we got the ending that we got. Kind of feels at odds with the story when you really think about it. Him riding off to the sunset to then be back at his supermarket, and then a random Deadite shows up and he just does his thing. It does feel at odds. As a kid, I didn't notice, but rewatching it as an adult, it absolutely is at odds with the rest of the story. He had a completely different ending, as I mentioned when I was talking about the cliffhanger for season 3 of Ash vs. Evil Dead. And God knows where that was going to take us, but it did present a pretty terrifying future where the Deadites had taken over, and I believe the year was 2083 or 89. Nonetheless, the future was fucked at the hands of Deadites. And considering that Raimi already gave us a crazy Dungeons and Dragons-esque medieval horror tale, I would have loved to have seen where he was going to take that movie. Now, I love how in the 3rd act of the film, which is really like the last 37 minutes of Army of Darkness, the Army of Darkness that consists of just skeletons, undead, act like they are indestructible. All it takes is a quick pulling of the rug from under them, and they're just rolling around in pieces like marble on the floor. And we do get the Necronomicon doing a bunch of really crazy shit in this movie. From creating little minions of Ash himself to 3 different Necronomicon who absolutely make it very hard for him to decide which one is the right one. This movie is absolutely creative. It is ambitious. It does so much that I find it hard to hate. I don't know why anyone would hate it. I understand that it is the most unlike Evil Dead from what people are used to. And this ultimately ends up becoming like the ultimate peak male fantasy of riding away on a horse with the damsel in distress while holding a shotgun and a chainsaw for a hand and looking utterly fucking cool, saying words like groovy. Granted, the shit is cheesy as hell. It is a 1992 movie, but it knows it, and it's part of the charm. And I feel like when people watch Army of Darkness, they kind of forget that that is Ash Williams at that point. That is his arc. That is him. And the bad rep that this movie does get, although now suddenly beloved in a very cult manner, is lost upon me. I think that the humor and Bruce Campbell in this are incredible. This is a showcase for him. It is the least Evil Dead film in the franchise, but it is an absolute showcase for his acting chops and his humor. And in a lot of ways, he reminds me of peak Jim Carrey during The Mask. Like, I absolutely love Bruce Campbell's performance. He just throws himself into Ash like it's second nature, in the same way that Tony Stark is Robert Downey Jr. and vice versa. Bruce Campbell is Ash Williams. There is just no denying it. And we get so many good fucking one-liners in this movie, like, yo, you she bitch, let's go, or give me some sugar, baby. Like, come on, man. And I do think that some of the practical effects in this hold up so well. Sure, it's sort of stuck in that uncanny claymation stop motion phase of special effects, but in a lot of ways I kind of prefer that to the over rendered or I should say under rendered CGI that we have now when it comes to a lot of horror movies. I wish that more horror movies would adopt the level of stop motion and cross-pollinate that into some kind of CG rendering that would give it something unique, something different, and we've lost that fucking decades ago. But watching the special effects, I was just kind of in glee, realizing like I really fucking love how unserious this movie is and how much it's willing to be what it is willing to be. Again, we forget that Evil Dead is a series and a franchise that started on chances and took a lot of risks, and Army of Darkness just felt like the next evolution of something that was already doing that and took it to a whole other level. The negativity that it did garner was very obviously because of the interference from the studio. Fuck those guys. Also, shout out to the athleticism that he gets in this movie, because my man swashbuckles when he's fighting Evil Ash. Like, he is just fighting with 2 swords. Like, he's just been swashbuckling all his life. Like, he's just been hanging around Jack Sparrow for like the last 2 decades. And he just knows how to counter and parry like it's nothing. Then he flips. Like, it's just crazy how like he's just good at shit. Anyway, complete peak male fantasy. I love that movie and it's so fun. That brings me to my top 3. I'm absolutely going to include this because while it's not a movie, it is absolutely a huge part of the Evil Dead franchise. Ash vs. Evil Dead. Ash vs. Evil Dead feels like a build-up. The final stepping stone, the final milestone in the development of Super Saiyan Ash. Like, we are at his funniest, dumbest, brawniest, cheesiest, yes, yet most badass version of him, all packed into a guy who lives in a trailer park and has a bit of a gut. And I just, embracing an aged Ash is phenomenal. But not only does this series embrace Ash, obviously we have Kelly and Pablo, who are such great counters to him. Like, they're in supporting characters. These supporting characters are just as memorable as he is. I grew to love them through 3 seasons, and not just that, but every episode was about half an hour, And we got peak set pieces, all right? Just not just in action, but in horror. The practical effects of every entity, Deadite and demon and giant fucking demon or legion hellspawn from Hell's Clitoris was just peak practical effects, peak makeup, peak blood splatter. There's so many memorable designs in terms of the Deadites and in demons. And not only that, but had they just thrown some grain on this bitch, it would have felt like it was right out of the 80s. Like, absolutely peak. There's a lot of stop motion use. Again, and what's funny is this show came out in 2015 to 2018, right? So it would have been easy to just throw in some special effects, but there are scenes in this that actually use the stop motion effects from the 80s and 90s. And it worked. And it's such a love letter. One, to the fans, and two, to the evolution of his character, to really just go so hard these 3 seasons and give us an arc and grow him as a character and teach him some lessons, but still keeping him the same, keeping him flawed, still keeping him heroic, and also adding some more characters to the rogues gallery of Deadites, because there's some genuinely terrifying demons in the show that are just like, holy shit, how are you able to be this funny and make me crack up, but also make me reel in horror at some of these designs, because some of these designs are fucking insane. Yeah, Ash vs. Evil Dead was just a brilliant show, and I really, really, really hate that we're not getting season 4. This was the one that broke Bruce, and he was like, yeah, I think I'm putting Ash away. Like, I'm putting him away. I'm sorry. Like, after that, I'm just producing, and it kind of breaks my heart, because I do think he has one good hurrah in there somewhere. He's got one good last battle in him, and I would have loved to have seen his arc close. If it was going to end anyway, I would have loved to have seen it end with season 4 and get the full encompassing vision of what a Deadite fueled future would look like. I mean, he got a fucking car. We were gonna go Mad Max as hell. That shit would have been crazy. And I guess in show form, like, it could embrace its oddities that come with the aging. That wouldn't necessarily pop off with a new audience, but that's what made it special. Now we're down to my 2, okay? My last 2. And this is, I'm going to be judged so hard. We know which 2 are left. My number 2 is Evil Dead 2. And this obviously gets, like, it had to be at least 2. I think this movie, in terms of Evil Dead, is Evil Dead at its best. Everyone knows it. Everyone thinks it. It is one of the best horror sequels ever made. It is the best version of Ash we'll ever see. It has some of the gnarliest, goriest, and most chaotic Evil Dead sequences in the entire franchise. It is a perfect, tightly constructed, concise, and very, very well written and defined and structured Evil Dead movie. There are no woes to be had with this film, and that's it. This movie bangs. This movie rocks. It does enough to give you some lore in a way that part 1 didn't have the time. We get to know about Nobi. We get to hear the audio tapes and get just enough to build some lore and mythos amidst all the chaos. Finding the book in Kandar, which goes back full circle to when Ash goes to Kandar in the 1300s. All that stuff. I mean, he's in the castle. All that stuff. That was such peak, because when you think about it now, having seen them all, we see where that story goes. We know where that story goes. And it was enough to really carry it forward towards something that was sensible. Like, it really did set the roots for such a great franchise. I think 2 is an absolute peak example of balancing chaotic pacing and great set pieces and great horror, especially for the 80s. Like, my God, absolute horror. Fully embracing the camera work, the practicality of the stunts, the practicality of the fog, the practicality of the lighting. I mean, this is such a, even with a bigger budget, still felt very much like a DIY film. There's nothing about this film that doesn't feel catered with love. Like it was his attempt at making a movie with the thought that if this was his last movie, it was going to be his best. The deterioration of the cabin and how he absolutely optimizes the real estate that he's filming in. I mean, we go outside to the evil trees. Every room in this cabin gets completely destroyed and demolished. The fucking deer on the wall comes to life. The books start talking. The shed has its own set piece. And then eventually we make it down to the basement with the witch. And it's like, this is its own set piece, and everything in the set dressing feels like it's telling a story that is supposed to, in one way or another, sort of emulate what he's going through mentally. And it is complete chaos the way he just destroys this cabin. There's no way he didn't shoot this in order. You know what I mean? Because it just really shows that every room was utilized completely to give a different experience, a different set piece. He had such an understanding of how to work with the space, the camera, the actors, the stunts. It just feels like a weird manifestation of Dante's Inferno. And in so many ways, I think that's what really makes it unique, is that he didn't waste a single shot. Like every shot in the movie has a purpose. And whether it's the set design, the story, the way things are delivered, it's not deep at all. But he just knows how to use it well to keep your attention and keep you invested. And I think that's just, there's so much love to show him because of that. And so, yeah, absolutely has my respect in every way, shape, or form for what he did with that movie. Given a second chance to actually commit to his full vision. But what's my number one, you say? Evil Dead 2013. And I think that while this could be a controversial take, I also think it shouldn't. I think Evil Dead 2013 hit such a sweet spot for me in terms of look, right? Like, there's something about older films. Older films, with the exception of, obviously, The Exorcist, my favorite movie of all time, the best movie ever made, which still gets under my skin and still unnerves me. Most films in the horror genre from the 70s up aren't scary to me, but there's an admiration when I watch them, because I go, that started so much for me, right? Like that started me down the path of being this horror that I am now. And it means a lot to me to sit back and as an adult further reference and analyze these scenes and go like, man, that made this thing possible. You know, that iconic line means this. Yeah, it's just when you get older and you start fixating on the past and how that reflects who you are and what you do now, those movies obviously hold a very, very near and dear place in my heart that is under lock and key. That's why I love going back to the oldies, right? They just don't make them like they used to. And everything was new-ish back then. But when I watched Evil Dead, there was a genuine sense of tension for the circumstances of coming across the Necronomicon in this shitty-ass cabin that looked a lot like the first. And being what I loved was having Mia and the crew be there, not because we're just teenagers or we're just, college students just looking for some fun. No, they were there to help a friend detox. And already I was like, oh, that's a cool angle. It's like we can sort of weave this into the horror, Obviously, we knew that she was going to complain about seeing things and they wouldn't believe her because the setup was, well, she's detoxing. She's done this before. She's going to say everything she can to get the fuck out of this cabin. And that alone excited me. I was like, wow, we're starting somewhere. Like, we're definitely trying to deviate from the usual setup of a horror film in a cabin. And every character in the movie has some level of connection to each other. Mia's brother, Mia's friends, and then there's also some level of discomfort between Mia's brother and her friends that exists, a sort of sense of history that's not yet forgotten or forgiven. And I just thought that gave me a sense of like, we might be trying here. Like, we're not just here for the gore fest. Of course, we are. But I commended them for not needing to try and trying anyway. But then we get into the aesthetics of the film. The cabin looks mildewy and rusted and moldy and gross. It's like you can smell it through the screen. It feels like the screen is pulsating. The lighting is reflective of something impending. Like, it feels like it's dim already. And you know that there's a sense of dread that's building up. And the whole time I was thinking, like, how much dimmer is this thing going to get? And not in, like, I can't see what's happening kind of way, but overall, how's the shading going to change? How's the lighting going to change? And we get that killer third act, and red becomes the dominant color. Draining blood, Mia's red dress. Like, every bit of this film is catered in such a way that it is done with love to the Evil Dead. Because I know that we think Evil Dead is Evil Dead 2. And that's fair, because that's when we really got to know Ash. Like, that is the one that put us in his head, and we spent all the time with him. But we forget The Evil Dead wasn't a straight up comedy the way that Part 2 is, or Army of Darkness is. The Evil Dead is subtle in humor, and it is a straight up classic horror movie. Like, it is a horror movie. It is gory, it is dreary, it is gloomy, it is a horror movie. And in a lot of ways, it's way more grounded than 2 and 3. This, I feel, was a kind of a very smart way to go, where I know people criticized it. It's not the humor of, bro, I know we're being selective because we have love for the second, but what started it all was a serious horror movie, and Evil Dead 2013 was playing it straight, and I thought that was awesome, because you can't go up against Bruce Campbell's Ash. You just can't. But you can try to maybe perfect the formula of the Evil Dead in a way that could appeal to the horror buffs out there that maybe felt like back then 2 left behind what they liked about Part 1, which was the horror anchor. And Evil Dead 2013 felt like it was trying to anchor itself in what the first one was doing. And I was like, yeah, I'm so good with this, dude. I love this. And it was scary. The makeup, Mia's makeup, looking like a bruised victim, a decomposed body that is reanimated by the means of something unknown, cosmic, and hellish. Like, come on. And me being the exorcist slut that I am and loving the makeup effects on Reagan, so reminiscent of that in a lot of ways. I think one of the most terrifying things about The Exorcist is that the little girl is that Reagan's body is in fact decomposing because the demon, Pazuzu, is not allowing her to nourish herself, to drink, to sleep. She is decomposing. She is dying, and she has no control over what's happening to her body. All she can do is feel and watch. And Mia's character literally looks like that. And it makes sense. It makes absolute sense. And there's something so creepy about her fucking giggling like Reagan in the basement while the slit of light coming through the basement door, the hatch, is just illuminating her absolute demonic glee. Not to mention the gore is up there. Like, it's up there. I genuinely think it's absolutely brutal. It shoots above what Rise did in terms of gore. It is absolutely brutal. The brother's girlfriend cutting her arm off because it was coming to life. Fucking awesome. The nurse friend cutting her mouth open with the fucking glass in the mirror. The teacher having to pull the needle out of his fucking eye after she stabs him over and over and over again. The end, Mia having to rip her arm off because the Jeep landed on her, and the only way she can get away is by completely detaching her arm, using her feet, so she can then use the chainsaw to kill evil Mia. Like Evil Dead had evil Ash. like Army of Darkness had Evil Ash. Not to mention the book itself, the Necronomicon. Such a beautiful and dark, demented depiction. And I think that it does a great job reestablishing Evil Dead as a horror franchise, which is why sometimes I hear people out and get a little confused as to why we are opposed to the seriousness now. I do think that what Bruce Campbell did with Ash was something only Bruce Campbell could do. And he's been given the decades to make that character iconic. I think anyone who tries to replicate that is in for a huge L, which is why we've got these very serious in tone films. I also heard a while back that we were trying to, and obviously we had the post-credit scene of Bruce Campbell, you know, saying groovy at the end of Evil Dead 2013, which I don't think really went anywhere. It wasn't meant to go anywhere, maybe to gauge people's excitement and eventually do a crossover, but the tones, 2013 is so serious. It's so The Evil Dead. To have Bruce Campbell's groovy ass come in and, you know, start slapsticking with Mia just would have felt out of tone. Not saying it can't work, just saying I definitely didn't, I can't see the vision, and I definitely need someone to show me if that was the intent. But nonetheless, we are far beyond that, and we are now down to Evil Dead Burn. We had just wrapped up Evil Dead Wrath, which comes out, I believe, 2028. Oh my god, we already finished that, and it's going to be in post-production for like fucking a year, which is insane. But it begs the question, what is Wrath about, right? Burn obviously is going to tie a lot of things together. We have the mention of which Necronomicon is going to be in this movie. Is it going to be the one from Rise? Because we have Ash's Necronomicon, we have 2013's Necronomicon, right? And now we have Rise. All those were established to be different. Which one is going to carry over to Burn? Now I'm going to assume it is the one that Jessica has, since Jessica is in this movie. But I wonder how much of Nobi's lineage is going to play into it. How much are we going to lean into the humor? Is this going to be Rise all over again? Kind of hope it's not. Kind of hope we lean a little bit into the humor. I do hope we get the Kandar dagger somewhere at some point. Kind of just disappeared. It'd be nice to have that. I want Evil Dead to take chances after Burn. Now, assuming that Burn hasn't taken any chances, I'd like to see Burn having taken. I would love to see the chances that Burn takes. I hope the Kandar dagger's in there. I hope we get a little bit more about the mysteries of the Necronomicons as a whole, the set of 3. I like that we're not getting it by normal means here like we usually do for the looks of it. Looks like we are actually actively seeking it out to bring someone to life, which I think is a good twist, and I'm happy for it. Wrath has me excited because that is a 1972 based prequel. Going back 10 years from the first Evil Dead. So, here's my thing. I'm curious because the director of this one is known to lean into character study. I'm curious if in the prequel, moving forward, which is going to be shot in Ecto 100, it's going to have the frame jitters and the old school look. I wonder, one, are we going to go back? Because CG effects don't look good with that kind of framework at all. So I wonder if with that, are we going to bring back the claymation effects? That'd be awesome. That'd be brilliant. And also, because it is a prequel, are we going to explain why these Necronomicon keep showing up in places? Where do they keep coming from? Why do they just randomly appear? Now, granted, obviously, Nobi took it to the cabin, but Rise, we only got that audio message from the priest from the 1920s on the vinyl. That's it. Will we get some background on that? You know, how do these different figures continue to find and discover these Necronomicon? Could those moments, those stories being told in those audios be worth their own films? Or are we going to go deeper into the history? Which I think this is like kind of the thing that I want is let's have one that takes chances like Army of Darkness, right? Like we did the slapstick medieval. Let's go back in time a little bit more, you know? Let's go back to the Salem witch trials. Well, that's the movie was in the 1300s. Salem happened in the 17th century, right? So obviously not back, but meaning let's go back in history again. Let's do one with the Salem witch trials. Let's see some people fuck around with the Necronomicon because they get unjustly accused of being a witch, and they say, "Fuck it, I'm gonna show you a witch." Let's see them take chances. There's so many things. These things are old as hell. We could absolutely go back and take some chances, and I feel like Wrath is going to take that chance. And I feel like by establishing its own visual look, it's also going to establish a sense of ownership over the old ones, the look of the old ones, right? We have the modern Burn is another take on the sort of natural take, move forward on the modern ones. But like going back and making it look like an 80s movie or a 70s film, does that mean that we're going back to that style, that humor? Are we going to be a little darker, a little weirder, a little more cult? Are we still going to be gory? Like, I'm so many questions that I feel like Wrath is really going to take chances just based on all that I know. But I would love to see a little bit more lore breakdown on how the Necronomicon show up in different places. I would love to see the take on stop motion effects. That would be fucking awesome. There's just so much they can do with that. But anyway, that is my list. This is quite a long video and the longest on the channel, I'm sure, by the time I edit this. So thank you to all who watched and sat and listened. Please share your list down below. I am eager to know and to listen. I know a lot of you are very passionate, as I am, but more so about this franchise. So please, please, please let me know your list. Let me know if you agree. And one day away, man. So all I gotta say is I'll see you at the movies for Evil Dead Burn. We are right there, man. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.